Welcome to First Things First. Good morning to you. It is Thursday. I'm Jenna Wolf. That's Chris Carter, the Hall of Famer, always in a good mood. This is Nick Wright. Take a cup of coffee, Nick. Take it in. It's going to be a lovely couple of hours.
Man, this has been such a fun week of shows. Right after the show's end, we have the World Cup going on.
Good soccer,
It's been great. This has been a fun week so far.
Yeah, we've had a lot of fun. But we are going to start this morning with basketball. We start with the biggest team trying to land the biggest free agents. 2 days ago, Magic Johnson said it could take at least 2 summers to land a big free agent. Now they have reportedly reopened trade talks with the San Antonio Spurs to get Kawhi Leonard. They think trading for Kawhi could secure a commitment from LeBron, which is important because LeBron is reportedly hesitant to be the first superstar to join L.A. The domino effect. What do you think, Chris? Should the Lakers do whatever it takes to get Kawhi Leonard?
I mean, whatever it takes. And when you look at the Lakers franchise, I mean, what pick or what player can't they trade? Like, it's not like they have this is not Boston, all right? I believe Boston has a substantially better younger players. Forget about Kyrie, forget about Gordon. But if you look at Jaylen Brown and if you look at Tatum, like, I believe what they can do, it might be. So if I was San Antonio, I would be looking to try to trade him to a team like Boston because I like Tatum a lot more than I like Kuzma or I like Lonzo Ball. Now, they need a point guard in San Antonio. And I like the message of San Antonio, them saying, you know something, we're going to try to keep Kawhi or we're going to trade him to the East. Like, we're going to throw the West on the back burner. So now I believe that the Lakers, they made an initial offer to him. Then they had to come back. We have to sweeten that offer. And there's no one on that roster that I wouldn't mind trading. Because if I'm able to trade, because you have to realize is, well, what if I give up a couple players and a couple number 1 picks? Well, what would it take if you were trying to get LeBron James? If you were trying to trade with Cleveland, straight up, what would it take? So you need to consider that when you know that if you get Kawhi, you're going to get LeBron.
That's the key.
So why there is no asking price for me that would be too high because I know the trickle-down effect is going to try to put another one of those banners in the rafter and what it would take to get LeBron by himself. And now I have the now in LeBron, but I also have the future in Kawhi. So for me, they can have all the players and they can have a number of picks now.
There is a bit of irony in you saying you like Tatum and Brown more than Ingram and Ball, when Ingram and Ball were taken as the number 2 picks of the draft, when Brown and Tatum were the number 3 picks of the draft. Like, L.A. could have the exact young core that Boston has. They were picking ahead of them in both of those drafts. They just took the other players. But I would, if I am Los Angeles, I make a Godfather offer to San Antonio. I tell them they can have, because everyone, the way people are making this out, it's Josh Hart, who doesn't really matter, Kuzma, who kind of matters, plus Ingram or Ball, and a future first-round pick is the generic offer. That's not the offer I would make. I would have Ingram and Ball. And if you need be, you know what? Kuzma as well. Because you are not just trading for Kawhi. You are trading for Kawhi plus LeBron. And this is something people need to understand, as I have a little bit of reportage to do, a little information to give people. You should, while the Lakers and the Cavs are the favorites right now, you cannot eliminate Houston and Philly yet. You cannot eliminate them yet. Why does that matter? If you're the Lakers and your thought process is, well, we're going to play hardball with San Antonio. At some point we'll get Kawhi. If LeBron stays in Cleveland, that's fine, because then you can go after LeBron again next offseason. But if you wait on Kawhi and LeBron ends up opting for Houston or Philly, then you're never getting him. So if the Lakers thought it's just us or Cleveland, then they can be a little more cautious on Kawhi.
Yes.
Maybe they miss out on LeBron for a year, but he'll be a free agent again next year. What LeBron is not going to do is sign a short contract in Houston or Philly. And if I know this, the Lakers know this, Houston and Philly are still options for LeBron. So that's why the first domino of Kawhi Leonard is so critical.
And I think you're really concerned, or you're really looking at Philadelphia, because they have the cap space and they have the chips to be able to move. So the Lakers, they can't think it's just them in San Antonio trying to make this deal.
But also, haven't the Spurs already said they don't really want to send Kawhi to the Lakers? I mean, if the Sixers just offer, say, a little bit more, or Boston, I know Boston's not on the table, or whoever it is, someone in the East, the Lakers were going to have to send all that, plus maybe more.
Right, so this is why I said the Godfather offer, because I think Boston is hesitant to send anything substantial because they think it's a one-year rental. Philly is hesitant to send anything. The Philly's best pieces are not tradable in Simmons and Embiid. Now, Fultz depends. Let's see what the Spurs think of him. But the Lakers have they have better assets to trade than Philly, and B, they have more incentive to include all of their assets than either of those teams, because the Lakers know if we trade for Kawhi, it's a 5-year commitment.
Which is why you made a great point yesterday that what the Spurs should do is just take the best offer. Don't worry about sending Kawhi to somewhere in the West. Take the most that you can get. And if the East is only going to be looking at maybe 1 year because Kawhi really does want to end up with the Lakers, although Paul George wanted to end up with the Lakers and now he may be staying, you should take the best offer.
Well, R.C. Buford, I believe that was just a ploy. That was just a negotiating chip. Because they said, we're trying to keep Kawhi before the meeting. Then they had the meeting with Kawhi, and Kawhi told him he didn't want to be there. He didn't want to come back into the locker room ever again. So then they said, something, we're going to try to keep him in our program, or we're going to trade him to the East. That immediately intensified the pressure on the Lakers.
Right.
Magic Johnson knows. How you going to quit in 2 years, which you said you were going to quit, and then not make a substantial offer like – I'm sure Magic would give a king's ransom for Kawhi. And I believe that the Spurs did a great job of really putting the Lakers in a corner. You're going to have to make a great deal to be able to get Kawhi. And I just believe the other ramifications as far as will Kawhi sign a long-term going east, it just makes it more complicated.
And there's one interesting thing that's gone under the radar that hasn't happened that tells you the Lakers know that this is something they need to try to get done within the next week. They haven't signed their rookie Mo Wagner, out of Michigan. Why does that matter? Everybody knows what contract he's going to get. NBA draft picks are slotted. There's no negotiation there. When you sign your draft pick, you cannot trade him for 30 days. And so why would they not have signed him already? Because if you sign him and the Spurs want him in that package, you can agree to it, but you got to wait for 30 days. LeBron ain't waiting 30 days to make his decision. Some of LeBron's management team is going out of the country at the beginning of next week. LeBron wants this thing wrapped up. That report was accurate, that this thing, or Brian Windhorst speculation, that this thing should be wrapped up before July 4th. That is exactly what I'm hearing as well, that this should not bleed on late into July. The Spurs know that. The Lakers know that, pardon me. And that takes me back to the conversation we had months ago, see? If they trade for Kawhi and then LeBron signs there, then all of a sudden, does Paul George look at it and say, oh, it's my hometown team and we'd be the favorites? Because they could make that work. They'd have to stretch provision Luol Deng, but they could make getting all three of them work. But the first domino has to be Kawhi Leonard.
Yeah, and I believe that, and I think I'm the first person to talk to you about the Kawhi, LeBron, and Paul George, because I had heard that Magic was going to make a push for Kawhi. He had information that led him to believe Kawhi wanted out of San Antonio, and that this time Kawhi was rehabbing in New York City. So what a domino effect. I believe the Lakers, they should sweeten the pot to try to get Kawhi before this weekend.
What would you trade for Kawhi, LeBron? What would the pack, if Kawhi and LeBron were on the same team and you could trade for both of them, what would you give up?
So you can have Kareem, Shaq, Jerry West.
Exactly right. And
because you're going to change the history of the team.
And if Paul George might be coming as well, that's why I'd say Ball and Ingram, 3 future first-round picks, because the future first-round picks ain't going to matter.
Plus draft picks, or do they have enough?
And it's not as if we don't believe they can play. It's you getting 2 players in their 20s, and Paul George and Kawhi, and you're getting LeBron James.
And you also know you're not going to have what happened in Oklahoma, where you had Melo and Paul George and Russ, and there were 3 separate players, and it turned out they couldn't all play together. You already know that these guys are most likely, they're veterans, they've played, they're going to be able to play
Listen,
together.
I've made the point that I think LeBron fits anywhere. I think LeBron and Ben Simmons don't care if it's redundant. LeBron plus Harden don't care if it's redundant. But there are better fits than others. LeBron and Kawhi is a perfect fit. Because Kawhi, what is Kawhi's one weakness as a player? He is not a playmaker. He is not an assist guy. That is his one weakness, and weakness is maybe too strong. The one thing he doesn't focus on is the passing the basketball. He's not a guy that's going to be your point forward, even though he probably has the skill set that he could be. LeBron and Kawhi are a perfect fit. If you maybe could also add Paul George to it, now we're talking about two of the best 6 players in the league, along with another guy that's in the top 12. Like, but it all starts with Kawhi Leonard. It'll all starts with
the same amount of talent as LeBron had on his team last year.
Exactly right.
Joke. All right, we'll talk much more about this. Chris Broussard is going to join us for a couple segments today. But coming up, how much will the future of Paul George tilt the balance of power in the West? We touched on it. That's next. First things first.
At Buffalo Wild Wings, we'll admit that we often go overboard with our limited time offerings. We just can't help ourselves. Take our new signature sampler. For $15, you get wings and 3 shareable options, like fried pickles or cheese curds. Then there's our aptly named over-the-top nachos, a literal mountain of crispy tortilla chips loaded with your choice of pulled pork or honey barbecue chicken, corn, jalapenos, and more. Then top it all off with our new platinum margarita. Go overboard with us today at Buffalo Wild Wings. Wings, beer, sports. Available for a limited time while supplies last. Please drink responsibly.
All right, this summer, the big story is whether the Lakers will end up with Kawhi and or LeBron. Last summer, it seemed like a lock. Paul George was all but coming to L.A. Remember? One season with the Thunder, then he'd be gone. Well, Adrian Wojnarowski is reporting that Paul George has become comfortable playing in Oklahoma City and that his, quote, thinking has changed. Nick, how good could Oklahoma City be if Paul George stays there?
So this is an intriguing question. Because I think the initial response people have is, around where they were last year, which was good enough for the 4th seed in the West, but not going to be good enough to make any real damage in the playoffs. But then you got to remember that their most valuable defensive player, a guy that I think was pacing to maybe be Defensive Player of the Year, and Andre Roberson, went out with an injury about 2/3 of the way through the season. And you look at the league's best 5-man lineups all year long. Number 1 was the starting 5 in Philly. Number 2 was the bench mob unit in Toronto. And number 3 was an OKC lineup that featured Andre Roberson. You also then keep in mind that you would hope that Russell Westbrook can improve at least one aspect of his game. That aspect being three-point shooting. I don't think he's going to change who he is as a player. I don't think he's going to change his mentality. I think he is who he is. But I also think he works too hard not to potentially improve somewhat as a player. And you say, if Roberson's healthy and the Spurs aren't as good, like, how can they figure out in the West? Go ahead.
So Woj actually just tweeted right now that Paul George will not opt into the final year of his contract, so he will indeed be an unrestricted free agent.
Oh, okay.
So there you go.
Ignore everything I just said.
Of course. Of course, he's got to be an unrestricted free agent. Why would you opt in to stay there when you have the potential for the first time in his career to be a free agent? Knowing that LeBron, he's going to be a free agent, knowing that the news that Kawhi potentially is going to get traded. Like, you can't be encouraged to stay in OKC. You know the best news out of OKC? Oh, Melo's going to opt into his $27 million. You think that helped the situation? Because this is my problem. Even with your theory as far as Russ improving in the one area, who is the one person in the organization that is going to go to Russ and point out his weaknesses? Your overall shot selection, and you shouldn't have a green light to shoot a 3 whenever you want to. Do you tell me there's someone in that organization that's going to have that conversation?
Should be Billy Donovan, but I don't think he can.
And that's the reason why I don't like Paul George there. I don't have a great deal of faith that Billy Donovan is the guy to be able to bring this collection of players to get them over the hump. Why? They're offensive sets. I don't believe they run enough plays for Paul George to get him better looks. The way he shot the ball in with the Pacers, I believe is not the style they play is not the best style for him. Now, people say, a 3-point shot this year, he shot a career high. Yeah, because they had more spacing. They got Westbrook on the court. They also playing in the West where the pace was a lot quicker, and they had Melo on the court a lot of the time. So I don't think it's a great fit for him. And if Paul George, because there are going to be guys like this, and there's nothing wrong with it. Guy's going to make a lot of money. But Paul George, does he want to win a championship? Does he want to play in the marquee games that he was playing in with LeBron a couple years ago?
Against LeBron.
Yes, and I would like to, because in those environments, that was the best Paul George that we've seen. And I don't think he gets that playing with Russ, with the other team. What's going on in San Antonio, they'll always be a better organization, I think, than OKC. What Houston has, if they bring back their total roster, we know what's in Golden State, and I believe LeBron will be at the Lakers.
And so I should make this clear, and I appreciate and great job by our staff, because, I mean, this came down 3 minutes ago, that the report by Woj is he's not opting in. The report is not that he's definitely leaving.
Correct.
Now,
So he could
still say, so that's your point, which is, of course, he's going to not opt in. He's going to give himself the full menu of options and then figure out what he's going to do. It also removes the likelihood of a sign-and trade with Paul George.
Right, and it's not as if he opts into the contract, that gives them some great cap space, or it's one of those types of chips that they need to make to get him to secure some other player coming.
But what it does do is, if you take a step back, it has a feel like there are a lot of moving parts right now. That Paul George has spoken to LeBron, and that, well, let me put myself in a position that if you are putting yourself in a position that if Kawhi does go there and you do go there, everyone is kind of making this availability so that when Kawhi makes this, or the Lakers come up with their big offer, everything can seamlessly transition to the Lakers.
The Lakers potentially, but there's also we can tease this another direction, which is the Spurs are stubborn, or however you want to put it, and they don't trade him, or they're waiting. And LeBron says, no great options. I'm going to do another 1 + 1 in Cleveland. And then there is Philly, who's still going to have all that cap space, that might say, you know what? This guy right here.
This is what we talked about.
This guy right here.
Because I was like, if he doesn't go to OKC, LeBron does not go to L.A., where's a spot that he could end up?
Philly.
Now, you talking about a perfect fit.
Perfect fit.
Now, I believe he might even be a better fit than LeBron, because they wouldn't have to change the roster as much. And
you just plug him into Covington's role.
Yes.
Period. It's just better Robert Covington. I mean, the better offensive player. Covington at times can be a great defensive player, but so can Paul George. Like I think the Sixers would be better with LeBron, but the fit is better with Paul George. That makes sense?
Yes.
There's less adjustments you have to make. LeBron's overall talent level would make them better. So Paul George has a lot of options. That he still could stay in OKC. If the pieces fit for LA, that even if Kawhi doesn't go there, if LeBron says, you know what, I'm still going to go, he and Paul George get together and they go together. And then there is Philly. And that Philly team, man, Embiid, George, Simmons is a formidable threesome.
Yeah, I believe that Paul George is better at being with LeBron.
Yes.
He needs that alpha guy to be with him. I believe with LeBron, that frees him up to be the best two-way player outside of Kawhi. Him and Kawhi, I believe, are top 5 players as far as two-way players in the NBA. With LeBron, I believe that's a winning solution.
I think Paul George knows you can't win a championship if I'm your best guy. It's one of the reasons OKC was attractive to him and continues to be. Because he can be the number 2. But I think he also knows the best guy to be the number 1 to my number 2 is LeBron James. And if not LeBron James, the next best guy is probably Kawhi Leonard. And if you can do it with both of them, well, that's obviously the ideal.
All right, we're going to take a break there. Still so much more to be discussed. Speaking of Philly, Nick Foles speaks out about the future of Nick Foles.
Where do you do that?
That's next on First Things First.
Hi, I'm Alexi Lawless. I used to play soccer back in the 1900s for the U.S. Now you can find me talking about soccer this summer during the World Cup on Fox. Now through July 15th, you can get daily FIFA World Cup updates from me through your Alexa-enabled device. Just say, Alexa, play the Fox Sports Flash Briefing, and you'll get the latest tournament news straight from Russia. Alexa and Alexi. Now that's a winning team. Don't forget to watch the 2018 FIFA World Cup all tournament long live on Fox and FS1.
The first round of the U.S. Senior Open begins today. Check it all out today at 4 Eastern on FS1 or stream it live on the Fox Sports app.
Is that John Smoltz in that picture?
It is. Him and Freddie Couples.
Among the many reasons to watch, our own Smoltzy. John Smoltz making his professional golf debut as he joins the legends of the game. Among Smoltz's many accomplishments, 8-time All-Star, World Series champ, Baseball Hall of Famer, he said none of those accolades compare to playing at the Senior Open.
It's number 1. Everything else I've done has been part of a team. I want to be the best teammate, want to do the things that I can do to help a team win, but this is individual. And this is by far a game I've learned to love. I didn't like it. I was 20 years old and I started playing it because I had 4 days off in between starts.
Yeah, you had nothing else to do, right?
And I've just grown to love it, want to play as long as I can. Physically, unfortunately, there's things everybody deals with when they get to this point. But, you know, I'm having a time in my life, and I have the utmost admiration for these guys who have done it for a long time.
Really good guy.
I mean, a lot of
Great guy.
professional athletes have tried to do this, or they aspire to do this. We saw Tony Romo try for the U.S. Open. Of course, he's under the age of 50, but this has been a goal for a lot of professional athletes. John Smoltz, not only one of the best people in sports, man, he can golf his golf ball.
Well, and it's so funny this comes up today because yesterday morning in our pre-show meeting, and we got one of our mini tangents, we were discussing who has the best combination of broadcasting skill plus accomplishment as an athlete. And we were going through baseball. And the first guy you mentioned was Smoltz, about how great he's been on our broadcast, and also obviously a Hall of Fame caliber pitcher. Like, to now know he's a great golfer, it's unbelievable.
Yeah, it'd be tremendous. It'd be like me trying to run a marathon at 50.
Yeah.
Yeah, great accomplishment.
Absolutely.
Not
right.
going to happen, though.
Not going to happen. No. Half marathon? Quarter marathon.
Quarter marathon. Get
Walk
in the car.
to the park bench.
We can do that half the time.
Selling yourself short, Chris. You're selling yourself short.
I got my trophies.
Hey, it's time for stories to start your morning, brought to you by Ace, the helpful place. Mexico lost to Sweden yesterday, but Mexico is advancing anyway. They needed Germany to lose so they could advance. Germany lost. We'll have more on that in a second. So now Mexico will play Brazil on Monday on Fox. Nick, you picked Mexico from the beginning. Nice to see them advance.
I'm rooting for Mexico, and so, yeah, I picked with my heart rather than my head. This would have been tragic for them. Had Germany won yesterday, Mexico would have become just the second team in modern World Cup history out of 93 possible teams to win at least 2 games in the group stage and not advance. And it looked like that was going to be the case, but South Korea came through for it.
That would have been a bad break because they have played well, especially in the first 2 stages. As you mentioned, the historic proportion of it, only having teams that had won the first 2 with 6 points not make it through. Man, Germany had to fall on their face to make that not happen.
All 3 of our teams are still in it so far.
Absolutely.
All right, in 2010, it was Italy. In 2014, it was Spain. And now for the 3rd consecutive World Cup, the defending champs have been eliminated after just 3 games. Germany fell to South Korea yesterday. The reigning champs eliminated again. How shocked were you, CC, by this?
Oh, shocked. Shocked. I mean, goodness gracious, Germany not making it through the group stage. And we talked about, I think I tweeted it yesterday, as far as how long it's been since we've seen this. I mean, they are a powerhouse. This is one of the biggest upsets that we've ever seen in World Cup history.
Listen, the last time Germany, forget make it through the group stage, the last time Germany didn't make it to the final 8 teams left was a year they were banned from the tournament because of World War II. It's been since 1950.
Yes.
They've been in one of the final 8 teams left standing each and every World Cup. What a bizarre tournament for them. They led the entire tournament in shots, and they won 1 game. And the 1 game they won, they needed a miracle goal in the final moments. Just a disastrous tournament for
Surprising, too, how bad they were on defense. Typically, they're a very imposing, physical team, weren't able to exert their will on teams in this tournament.
All right, to the NFL now. Saints wideout and Buckeye great Michael Thomas put together quite the season last year. 104 catches for over 1,200 yards. But wait, there's more. Thomas says he expects to be one of the elite wide receivers in the NFL. Says, quote, I feel like I'm going to be right there with the best of them. CeCe, how good could Thomas be?
Oh, Thomas is very good. He works as hard as anyone in the league, and he's one of those kind of kids that he is really dissecting his game. He takes on criticism. He's trying to be coached. Like, he's not one of those kind of guys who wants to be a diva. He's a hard worker. Keyshawn Johnson's nephew. Keyshawn's had a tremendous influence on him. Yes, and we were so proud of him that he decided to go to Ohio State. But he's even gotten better since he's gotten into pro football.
Shout out to the Saints for seeing this talent, not only in the draft, but in moving on from Brandon Cooks.
Yes.
So they could feature him more. You sent me a really interesting article about #1 wide receivers in the NFL. I haven't gone through it yet. Is he a true #1 to you?
Absolutely. Right now, he's one of the top 5 guys in the league, and I believe he's benefited, like Drew Brees, of being with Sean Payton. You could see their offense and their creativity, him benefiting from that.
Adam Silver has gotten rave reviews as the NBA commish. Now he has the contract to back it up. Silver was inked to a 5-year extension through the 2023-2024 season. Let's just say he's not buying generic brand toothpaste anymore. Nick, how good has Silver been for the league?
He's been excellent. It's very tough to be the guy that follows the guy, and David Stern was the guy. I think Adam Silver, thus far in his tenure, has been as good, if not better. The league's ratings are at an all-time high, revenues at an all-time high, and the partnership between players and owners is as good as I've ever seen it in any pro sport. Like, with Stern was great, but it was a little adversarial. He imposes the dress code. The players don't like it. He's a little heavy-handed. The players don't like it. Silver has really partnered primarily with LeBron and Chris Paul, and it trickles down from there. There's been one mistake in his tenure in my eyes, and that was them not smoothing the cap. After they had the huge influx of television money, they didn't smooth the cap. It kind of screwed with free agency, allowed Durant to go to the Warriors. Now there's not as much increase in cap. But
what does that mean, smoothing the cap?
They had they could have, instead of having the cap jump $20 million in 1 year, it could have been like 777.
Which would have been more realistic
and would have been more fair. It would have been, but I say this: he wanted them to smooth the cap. It was the players that wouldn't let him do it. And so I think Silver deserves this extension. I think he's the best commissioner in sports.
One way you can determine how he's doing is look at the other sports. If you look at baseball, what Manfred's doing, very, very impressive. Now, always the lightning rod of all the commissioners is Roger Goodell. But they do have labor peace, but they don't have peace between the league office and the Players Association. They have that in the NBA. And anytime you can accomplish that, if you have peace between the two parties, you have a genuine respect, not only for the game, but the people that administrate the game and the people that play the game. And I see that in the NBA at this stage. And as you mentioned, it's hard to follow a great commissioner. Now, he's been able to do that, and also within his own personality. Now, that's one thing that I like, that people that have seen him come up through the ranks that said this is the person that we see now, that he is the boss. And what he's done from a social standpoint of how he was going to handle social issues is a step above any commissioner that I've ever seen in any sport. And for that, I have to be able to applaud him. They have a national anthem. They have a policy.
Yeah.
But they have also encouraged their players from a social standpoint to be able to speak about their independence, and they want to be involved in the things that they believe that the players want to be involved
empowered, not just encouraged, but empowered their players. And with the NBA, you can never, when you talk about that type of thing with the NBA, you have to recognize race will always be inextricably tied to this league more than any other league, because it is such an overwhelmingly black league, and the ownership is almost exclusively white. The league office, the commissioner is a white guy, David Stern, white guy. Like, his ability to find common ground with the players, with the head of the NBA Players Association, Michelle Roberts, has been outstanding. I mean, the NBA is not a perfect league. It's far from it. But there are certain things that could be models for other leagues, that even though there's always going to be a union management push and pull, it can be a collaboration. They can be partners, and these guys really feel like partners.
Not to mention, the NBA is as popular as it's ever been. Issues and personalities, and there's a lot of fun things to talk about. We've had a good season. But let's talk about football now. Nick Foles stopped by the show yesterday on his post-Super Bowl MVP tour. Couple of takeaways. He's very tall. He's, in fact, a true blonde, and he's embracing his role as a backup on the Eagles team in no particular order. This offseason, there were plenty of rumors about Foles being traded somewhere where he could start. But after Foles renegotiated his deal with the Eagles, it seemed like he was set as the Philly backup. Here's more now from Nick Foles.
I would love the opportunity to lead a team. Now, let me also say this. I'm not just going to go to a team, say, hey, I want to lead this team and not see who they are. It's about an environment. It's about going to work every day and enjoying where you work, the workplace, having that relationship. Because it doesn't matter what the hours are in a situation like that. You're going to love what you do if you love the people you work with. If it's not a great environment, I don't care if it's a short day and it's an easy day, you're not going to enjoy it. So if that does come to be, I want to find the right pick, be with the right team, a team like the Philadelphia Eagles organization. They do it the right way. It's an amazing locker room with amazing leaders and coaches. And, I've been blessed to be a part of it. That's why I'm not running away.
You know, CeCe, you said weeks and weeks, if not months ago, that Nick Foles was comfortable in his role. That's the role he liked, even after he took this Eagles team to the Super Bowl. What was your reaction to what he said yesterday?
I'm not surprised at all. He's got a lot of respect for the game. And what they have a hard time doing is people always try to put themselves in their decision-making into other people's hands. Well, if I was Nick Foles, man, after a Super Bowl MVP, I want to get out there, get me a long-term contract, take over another team. Some players, that's not the most important thing. He's also smart enough to know, man, if you get knocked around, no matter where you go, because we all have to put in the same amount of work. He said that. Man, the days are long no matter where you go. But trust me, the grass is greener other places. There is better food. There is better services for the players. There is a better environment that when you show up to work, that you say, man, I don't mind working hard here, because they really take care of the players. That's what the Eagles did when they came to him to adjust his contract. They knew that he outperformed that contract, but he's also smart enough to know that, man, being part of a team, this is not golf. He's not an individual. The only way you can win in the NFL is have a lot of good players, not one good player. And no matter if you go somewhere and get paid an exorbitant amount of money, that, man, you can be happier being in a situation like he's in. And the other thing is, he knows the guys in front of him is better than him. And there's not a lot of quarterbacks that want to be able to.
And he's okay with that. He said he's okay with that.
He should be, because he has been the star. He also realizes that my career's not over yet. I still might be the star of a team eventually, but I'm not going to rush that situation.
Well, so, like, that part it was a very interesting and very honest answer that I really appreciated him giving, because he made it clear, yes, I want to be a starter at some point, but every starting job is not better than this backup job. Some starting jobs are better.
That's good observation.
I liked the answer, because it felt to me, because you and I were somewhat opposed on this right after the season, that there were parts of this that we were both right. One, your point that he was very content where he was. He knows Carson Wentz is better than him. And my point, which is, yeah, but don't you want to try to go out and prove you can be the guy? And he kind of split the baby there. His point was, yes, I do want to have my own team. But the idea that he would take any starting job is not accurate. Like, my gut feeling was, if there's 32 starting jobs in football, those are the 32 best quarterback jobs, and the next 32 are the 32 backup jobs. The way he made it sound like Eagles backup might be the 17th best quarterback job in the NFL. Does that make sense? Like,
yes.
And so I thought it was honest, and your point that he knows Wentz is better than him and he's okay with that, he made that very clear here. Like, I want Carson to be healthy, and he knows if Carson's healthy, Carson is the guy. He also, I think, knows, but there are probably some other teams that have a healthy starting quarterback that I am better than.
Look, we asked him a number of different times and ways about his relationship with Carson Wentz. You got this sense he genuinely likes Carson. He genuinely likes playing with him. There's a genuine mutual respect between these two guys. And as much respect as he gave Carson, Carson gave him back on that run, the last two games, you know, that Super Bowl win, the Super Bowl MVP. And now he's happy to hand the reins back over and saying, this is your team. You got us here. I'm happy with this role.
Yeah, at some point in your life, you have to realize sometimes more is not better. And you have to be able to judge yourself to know where you are from a mental standpoint, what's your family situation, what's your financial situation. Nick Foles has made a lot of money. Like, he's going to make a lot of money. But now, given that the modern-day quarterback is playing late in his 30s, some into their 40s, what's the rush to rush out of this great situation that he has and rush into a horrible situation? Because I'm going to tell you the worst jobs in the NFL. They are being a quarterback on a bad team. Because all you do is get criticized and criticized. And typically,
you get beat up.
You get beat up.
Yeah.
And why would I jeopardize my career and the cachet that I've developed? That he has been effective as a starter. He's been very, very effective as a backup. I believe there'll be a market for Nick Foles for the next 6 to 8 years, either as a starter or as a backup.
And I thought it was interesting, right after you didn't watch the show yesterday, right after we had Nick Foles on, we had Tamba Ali on. And we asked Tamba about Andy Reid. And Tamba immediately said, best coach I've ever played for. Now, Tamba's played for Herm Edwards, Todd Haley, Romeo Crennel, and then Andy Reid. And he said, Andy's the best coach I ever played for. Made me think about the coaches Nick Foles has played for. Andy Reid, then Chip Kelly, Jeff Fisher, then and then Andy Reid again, then Doug Peterson. I say that to say this. He understands the value in having a really good head coach, which only a veteran player really can. Like, you talk all the time about these young guys don't know nothing about pro football. He understands that, good personnel, good situation, but not the right coach, that maybe isn't the best situation. Because he couldn't speak highly enough about Frank Reich or their offensive coordinator now, Groh.
Mike Groh.
And about the importance of those guys for what he's trying to do.
But what he's also saying in this, we'll always talk about the football, we'll always talk about the coach, but he's really speaking about the organization, what they do in servicing the players, because that's been the one consistent thing. You say he played for Andy. Yeah. He played for Chip. Where?
Philly.
But the organization stayed the same, even though the coach's philosophy changed. So for me, with Chip Kelly, he wasn't embracing staying there. It was the same organization. So the system that they're running now and the way the organization treats the players, to me, that was one of the most important things.
Remind me, who was McNabb's backup? He was a long-time backup.
Wasn't it Doug Peterson?
No, maybe it was right afterwards. He was a backup forever. I can't remember his name. It's escaping me. I had a conversation with him about being a backup one time, and he said... Detmer.
Yes.
It was Ty, right? That was really good. And he said to me once, he said...
That's the stuff. Working them, bringing them, doing those puzzles, doing those brain puzzles.
I asked him, I said, how do you like this role? I mean, do you want to be a starter? He's... No, why does everyone think I want to be a starter? He goes, I really enjoy this. I like this organization. I like the role I'm in, and I like the opportunity that when it's time for me to play, I'll play. But he loved this Eagles organization, and he stayed there for a very long time.
I can understand that. But he couldn't play either.
He couldn't.
Okay.
That's the best job he ever had.
Right. As I was going through, I was like,
I need that spot in my brain back.
But
Get him out of there.
Listen, a lot of people didn't think that Nick Foles was as good as he was until you saw those last couple of games.
I think Nick Foles, ever since that 2013 season, has felt like I can play in this league in the right situation. There are certain backup quarterbacks who the last thing they ever want to do is play. Like, I feel like Jim Sorgi with Peyton Manning for a long time was like, man,
don't get hurt. Don't get hurt.
Like, I'm not getting exposed.
Right.
This is not what I need. Nick Foles isn't that guy, but he's also not a guy that feels like that overestimates how good he is. He's not a guy sitting here saying, man, I'm better than Carson Wentz. I should be the starter in this town, which after winning Super Bowl MVP would be hard not to feel that way, but he clearly doesn't.
Good conversation. All right, coming up, Kyrie's latest comments on LeBron might surprise you. Next on First Things First. Back here on First Things First, Chris Broussard with us now. Chris knows everything about basketball, so it helps that we're talking about basketball.
Speaking of great athletes turned broadcasters,
oh, yeah, right?
Chris Broussard. Good to see you, brother.
I'm just glad there's no footage of my Division III basketball days.
Well, you said that about your rapping. You have to have footage of something.
I'm going to get box scores.
It's all gone, man. It was pre-internet.
It's been white. It's been white. All right, Broussard, in the least surprising news ever, James Harden won his first MVP award after a stellar season. He beat out LeBron James, securing 85 of 101 first-place votes. LeBron's former teammate, Kyrie Irving, of the Flat Earth fame, had an interesting take on the results.
MVP is hard to gauge nowadays, like, because now you have the people's MVP, then you have, like, the NBA's MVP. You know, like,
so who's the people's MVP in your mind?
I think the people's MVP was definitely James.
Okay.
But the NBA MVP was definitely Bron.
So you think LeBron should have gotten the MVP?
I mean, if we're talking strictly based off stats, like, he checks every
It's him
mark,
every
like,
year, though, in that regard, right? Does anyone do more for one team than LeBron does?
Mm-hmm.
Look, he said a lot about their relationship in just a few little grunts right over there in that last part.
Well, I give Kyrie credit for being honest, not letting whatever his personal feelings are with LeBron. I think they actually are fine.
That is nice to see.
Yeah, that he didn't let that stop him from saying, look, LeBron's the best player in the world, period. I also think Kyrie may be falling into the trap that many fans fall into, which is not understanding it's strictly a regular season award. I've been a voter for almost about 20 years. The ballots are due April 17th. Last year was like April 14th, you know, before the playoffs start. But when you have the award ceremony after the postseason.
All people remember is the postseason.
So you know, you see LeBron have this tremendous postseason run, and you say
in the playoffs, I mean, forget the 82 games. In the playoffs, he goes up, forget one notch. He goes up two notches.
Exactly. Exactly.
So,
he's hitting clutch jumpers. You know, his numbers are off the chain.
He's playing 44 minutes a game.
Yeah,
You can make an argument for him getting the MVP based on what he did in the regular season, but James Harden was just
Well, here's the other issue, and Kyrie was right when he said it's hard judging MVP now because there's no defined criteria. The NBA doesn't set, like, they don't say just who was the best player, period. So to some voters, it's the best player, period, regardless of team record, whatever. To others, it's the best player on the best team. I try to take several things into account: individual performance and stats, team success, supporting cast, even historical implications at times, you know. And for instance, LeBron's clearly the best player in the world. Nobody, I don't think
And
any voter
it would be
denies
cleaner
it.
and simpler if the NBA did what I would like them to do, which is have that be a distinction that is announced every year. Just simply,
Just say,
best player, who holds the title. The best player alive is X, and you can. LeBron would have held it for about the last decade, and you can see like that. Then,
Well, so you saying make the MVP a different award? Have a
separate award from the league MVP for the season. And just have the media say who's the best basketball player in the league. Like, then people would have a much easier time with Harden winning his MVP, with Nash winning his MVP.
Yeah.
Because you would say, okay, they won the MVP, but we all acknowledge this guy's the best player.
The one thing that's been consistent is this is not a new argument.
Correct.
Right.
The best players in the world are not going to win as many MVPs as they should. Jordan should have won more. Kareem should have won more. Like all these guys, because people go through the fatigue of 82 games, and every year it's who can we prop up? Anthony Davis got a great chance. The reason why? He hadn't won one. Yeah. And people would like to see him. But I believe you look at the stat lines, but also you have to look at the stories that inside of what the numbers say. Now, Harden had a career high, 30 points he averaged a game. But that's also adding a superstar in Chris Paul. That's also in the storyline. They won 65 games, the best record. So that was worthy of MVP. But LeBron, we act like Harden averaged 30. LeBron only averaged 22. LeBron almost averaged 28.
Yeah.
And a career high in rebounds and assists.
And he was the only guy on their team.
Yeah, shot 10 points higher from the field than Harden. And, I mean, there's no one who went through something mentally like Kyrie to IT to another trade of a bunch of bums like LeBron. So for me, he had the most valid case in what he did this year and also playing in those 82 games.
But the one other thing that was interesting about these comments, though, was not about Kyrie's opinion, but about what it said about he and LeBron and their relationship. Because one thing I think the average fan has gotten wrong is that the reason Kyrie wanted out of Cleveland is because he couldn't stand LeBron James. I've never been told that. I have no reason to believe that. Kyrie's comments have never validated that. Their interactions on the court, whether it was game one of the season, the All-Star game, at any point never led you to believe that. Kyrie wanted his own team. Kyrie wanted to be the man somewhere. Kyrie was not most focused on winning. We know that because his list of teams included Miami and New York. Now, San Antonio would be a great winning place, and Minnesota's close. But Kyrie already has one of the most iconic shots in NBA history and a championship. And people also need to remember when Kyrie re-upped with Cleveland, LeBron hadn't come back yet. It was about 2 months before, it was 2 weeks. It was in the offseason LeBron chose to come back, but he hadn't come back yet. Kyrie thought, this is going to be my team. And then the most talked about athlete in all of sports goes there. So I don't think it was ever that Kyrie hated LeBron or hated playing with LeBron. I think Kyrie wanted his own team.
I think there were several factors with Kyrie. Now, their relationship personally was fine. They were cordial. They were friends. They didn't hang out all the time. Kyrie is kind of on his own and stuff like that. But some of it was LeBron. Like, Kyrie wanted to be a point guard. And I don't think he's that true of a point guard. You see in Boston, he's only averaging 5 assists. But he wanted, like, when you play with LeBron as a point guard, you don't know from possession to possession whether you're bringing the ball up or not, or you going to stand in the corner or on the wing. So Kyrie, that can be frustrating. And so there was some of that he wanted to show people, I'm a point guard, and I want to play like a point guard. But yeah, he and LeBron never had a blow-up, never had an argument, huge argument or anything like that. But I think, too, when I look at the MVP, Look, I think the Cavs underachieved the last few years in the regular season. You know, and fourth seed, I understand they had a lot of issues and changes, but so did Houston. I mean, Chris Paul missed 24 games. You had P.J. Tucker, Luke Mute, Chris Paul as new players, you know, so adjusting to another star coming to your team that has been ball dominant. Harden had to go through all that.
They did have several players had career years, though.
Yeah,
okay.
but I
Capella.
And I credit Harden for a lot of that, and D'Antoni's system ups numbers for guys. I mean, that's just been proven, you know. But I just think LeBron, like, if your team underachieves, it's going to be hard for me to vote you MVP. And they've proven, because not even just this year, but with Kyrie there, they win 50 games, 51 games 2 years ago, and then they run through the East. So it shows you the regular season they're underachieving, and I take that into consideration.
Go ahead, Jim.
I was just saying, why do they do that? If everyone agrees that this award, why can't they just finish out the season and then give this MVP award so you can factor?
Because that's what you mean at the end of the regular season?
No, at the end of the postseason.
At the end of the
that's the
finals MVP. Now you can
that's who would get it anyway. Probably.
So that's the same thing would happen.
And you can make the argument that they should have a playoff MVP. Like as opposed to just a finals MVP.
Hockey,
I think hockey has that. I know that in European soccer they have different ways of awarding the best players. This is always going to be a debate in this league, just like in pro football. The question's always going to be, does the MVP always have to be a quarterback? Because is it about value or is it about best? Is it about most outstanding season? Is it a team award? It's a
little easier in the NFL. The quarterback's touching the ball every play. He dominates the game.
But years ago, right, it wasn't always a quarterback. You had a lot of running backs getting it back in the day. Now, running backs were a bigger role back then.
Well, yes, they're still getting more touches. The quarterback's still able to dominate the game. The NBA, though, the guy can play on both ends of the court. It's just the 82-game schedule. I believe that we get fatigued talking about the best players. So eventually, we're always looking for an upset with the MVP, and that's what typically they've done.
It'd be nice if they said, if the league just defined it as, look, the best player, regardless of record, team record, what player had the best season individually? That would be interesting, because then you'd bring in Anthony Davis, Adetokounmpo from Milwaukee. You know, like, that would really make it interesting, because I think you get a lot more guys getting votes.
All right, Chris, stick around. Coming up next, the Lakers need Kawhi to land LeBron. Let's play dominoes. Next on First Things First. Here, First Things First with Chris Broussard. Chris, 2 days ago, Magic Johnson said it could take at least 2 summers to land a big free agent. Now they have reportedly reopened trade talks with the Spurs to get Kawhi Leonard. They think trading for Kawhi could secure commitment from LeBron, which is important because LeBron is reportedly hesitant to be the first superstar to join L.A. Broussard, should the Lakers do whatever it takes to get Kawhi?
Well, the problem is it's just not under their control. I'm sure they're willing to offer whatever they need to offer to get him, but if the Spurs don't want to play ball with him, then there's just nothing they can do. And I also think they need to have conversations with these players. Now, if it's not going to be LeBron, then his management team. You know, what is LeBron looking for? You know, what would he think of playing with Kawhi or playing with Paul George or playing with both? Or, you know, and talk to Paul George and Kawhi, too. Once free agency begins, you can do that. So not Kawhi, he's not free agent, obviously, but they need to talk to these guys and see what they're thinking. Like with LeBron, I believe Kawhi is much better than Paul George, or better than Paul George. You would rather have LeBron and Kawhi. But I think I'd rather have LeBron, Paul George, and the supporting cast, Brandon Ingram and all those young guys, Kuzma.
That's a great point.
Than just LeBron and Kawhi.
Yeah, that's a great that roster, because you don't have to give up anything to get Paul George and LeBron. I see what you're saying, even though you're saying Kawhi is a better player. But
you
look at the state. Yes.
But the question, though, is if you don't trade for Kawhi, are you going to risk ending up with none of them? Because here's the worst scenario for the Los Angeles Lakers, is that Kawhi, you don't trade for Kawhi, you hold the fort, you don't make. I think they could get it done. I think Ball.
Soon, no.
Yeah, I think you call them up and you say you're going to Ball, Ingram, and Kuzma, and a couple first-round picks. We'll give you everything. Nobody's beating that. Nobody's coming close to that. You want to cut off your nose, spite your face, and not trade him out.
But if they can get that at the end of the summer or the deadline,
so here's the problem though. And this is the issue. So I was told last night that it is not just the Lakers and Cleveland for LeBron, that you cannot X out Philly and you can't even X out Houston, that even if the Lakers and Cleveland are leading candidates, that all 4 of those teams are still on the table. If you don't trade for Kawhi and Paul George stays in OKC, which is still available, and if LeBron stays in Cleveland for a year, then fine, you run this back next year. But if LeBron goes to Philly or he goes to Houston, then you're never getting it. LeBron is not going to Philly or Houston for 1 year. And now you run the risk of, wait, what is the plan? Where is the big fish coming from if LeBron goes to one of those places?
But why would Paul George stay in Oklahoma City if LeBron James went to L.A.? If Kawhi's off the table and Paul George knows LeBron's going, wouldn't he want to go to
I'm talking about the reverse order, though, Jenna. What I'm talking about, I don't think LeBron's going to be the first domino. I think LeBron's going to wait and see. And so I think that the point is, I think if you get Kawhi, I think you have to look at the Kawhi trade as you are trading for multiple players. Because if you get Kawhi, one of these other guys is coming. And so, that's why I would give up everything, whatever it takes to go get him.
I don't doubt that they're willing to do that. If I'm the Spurs, I'm also looking at it like you are. We're trading them Kawhi and multiple players. Because, and I get what you're saying, and I tend to agree that at the end of the day, you have to do what makes your roster best. Yeah. And that's a heck of a trade that you just threw out as far as what the Lakers could give them. But if I'm the Spurs and I can get that in September and keep you from getting LeBron, why don't I do that? You see what I'm saying? They don't just want the Lakers not to get Kawhi. They don't want them to get LeBron, even if it's only for a year. They love to screw up the whole Lakers plan,
sure. Chris, I got a question for you. Do the Lakers need to see Kawhi on the court before they give up all these assets? Because ain't nobody talking about that. We act as if Kawhi had a sensational season. But he didn't play.
He was good in those 9 games and 25 minutes a night.
Yes.
No, I'm with you.
There is some risk to that.
I agree.
Right?
I totally agree. Now, I think they would look at it and say, we believe he's going to be fine. But there's a risk because he didn't play 82 games a year even when he's healthy. Now, some of that's Popovich sitting guys out, but some of that was also injuries here and there. And you're giving up a boatload of stuff. That's why it's just easier to go get Paul George if you can. And LeBron and
Chris, I just thought that you'd be the type of man that, something, before I need to touch my stuff before I get it. I just thought you would be like that.
I'm kind of like
that.
But here's the thing. This is, man, everyone knew Paul George was going to the Lakers.
No, you're right. It's a
risk. Listen, Indiana, trade me because in 2 years I'm a Laker. I mean, I've never seen an agent publicly say something like that with 2 years left on a contract. Not only is he leaving, this is where he's going. You might as well trade him. Credit, by the way, to Oklahoma City for saying we'll roll the dice.
Yeah.
It might end up paying off for him. You can say it kind of paid off last year, but the difference in OKC's future with just Russ, or if Paul George decides to stay, and I know there's the report, and we'll talk about it more later, he opted out of his deal, but he could still stay there. I would argue no one in the world, forget pro athletes, no one in the world can definitively say, here's what I'm doing 1 year from today. No, I don't care if you're the President of the United States. I don't care if you're a guy picking up trash on Fifth Avenue. I don't care if you're a pro athlete. You never know definitively what you're doing. So this whole idea of if the Lakers plan is, you know what, we'll keep our guys because Kawhi's going to come. And then LeBron will join him. Magic said it'll be 2 years anyway. Yep. Man, you're rolling the dice there.
It's a risk. There is no question about it. Because you're right. Everybody thought George was going there. What if Kawhi gets traded to Boston? They win the title. He enjoys playing with Kyrie. Even if they don't win it, you just enjoy the situation, like Paul George.
And what if a guy in Kawhi Leonard has only lived in, that I know of, Southern California and San Antonio? What if a big attraction of L.A. is, man, all these cities that aren't L.A. are terrible because San Antonio's the only place he's lived. Yeah. And then he lives in Philly a year, and he's like, oh, there's other awesome cities in America, not just Los Angeles. There's a lot of factors there if you're just going to say, don't worry, we'll get him later.
Chris, if you take Kawhi off the table, say the Spurs decide, you know what, I don't want to send him to the West. He's off the table. Why don't Paul George and LeBron, which I'm sure they've already had a discussion that says, hey, I'm not opting in. I'll wait to see what you decide to do. Would those two be enough? Like, would LeBron go to L.A. if it was just LeBron and Paul George?
Yeah, I believe he would. So
that's on the table. That's up to LeBron. If he wants to do that,
well, it's up to Paul George.
Well, what's keeping Paul George there if he can go play with LeBron and the Lakers?
And you told us Paul George likes to fish and hang out with old white dudes in the suburbs, right?
In Oklahoma City.
In Oklahoma City.
I don't think that was me, but I think some of that's true.
That was Mannix. That was Mannix.
I apologize.
I think there is truth to that, though.
Yeah, that Paul George is not a big city guy necessarily. That Paul George likes the low-key life, is at least what we've been told.
Why was he screaming about the Lakers? You know what I mean?
Right, that he was all but there.
Because it's home, right?
But it's a big city. He knows that, you know?
For sure. The point that I was making is that some guys, some NBA superstars, hate the small markets. Paul George isn't that guy, that he's more of a low-key guy, that he likes to go fishing, that he likes to just kind of hang out. And so I don't think any of these guys, except for Kawhi, know with 100% certainty where they want to play, and Kawhi is the only one that can't control it. Right? Kawhi's the only one that the decision's not in his hands.
now.
Correct, absolutely.
Because he can control it later.
Yeah, I've seen plenty of Lakers players fishing right on Rodeo Drive. Fishing. Let me get hurt.